The Hartley twins. This is the story of both twin sister who has great relationship till both fall love with the same men, with jealousy and cheating rock their world, and it start a series of activities to drive them apart. What happened their most cherished sisterhood? Stay tuned to the relationship story of Lie's betrayer. To the world, Madeline and Marissa Hartley were mirrors of perfection. Blonde, beautiful, born 5 minutes apart, and inseparable since birth. They shared everything growing up: clothes, secrets, dreams. Even teachers couldn't tell them apart unless one smiled. That was the difference. Madeline smiled to disarm. Marissa smiled to hide. The small New Hampshire town of Silver Hollow adored them. So did their wealthy parents, who treated the twins as prized ornaments rather than daughters. The Hartleys threw lavish parties, sent them to elite prep schools, and made sure the girls never wanted for anything except emotional attention. And in that emotional vacuum, the sisters turned toward each other like vines twisting for sunlight. But then he arrived. Declan Rhodes was older, charming, the mysterious new literature professor at the nearby college where both twins were enrolled for their final year. He wasn't like the other boys. He read Camus, drank black coffee, and quoted Neruda like a sin. At a campus mixer, he barely looked at anyone until he saw them.
"You must be the Hartley girls."
His voice sent something cold and thrilling down Madeline's spine.
"Which one are you?" he asked.
"Guess," Marissa challenged, eyes glittering like a dare. He studied them both. Madeline felt his gaze pause on her a little longer.
But he said, "Does it matter?" It was a joke, or a warning.
They didn't see it then. The first time Declan ran into Madeline alone was in the campus bookstore. They both reached for the same copy of Wuthering Heights. She laughed. He let her take it.
He said, "Do you believe in twin telepathy?"
She tilted her head. "I believe some bonds are dangerous." That made him smile.
The next day he passed by Marissa on the quad and said, "You look different today."
She didn't correct him. Instead, she leaned in and whispered, "Maybe you're just paying better attention." It was the first lie, and it wouldn't be the last. At home, everything seemed normal, but Madeline started staying up later, wearing perfume, practicing smiles in the mirror. Marissa noticed. She noticed everything. One night, Madeline came home humming, cheeks flushed. "Let me guess," Marissa said, voice tight. "You saw him again." Madeline blinked. "Who?" "You know who." Madeline shrugged. "He's a professor, not a priest." They laughed, but it wasn't warm. That night, Marissa stared at her sleeping twin across the room and whispered, "You always want what I want." The next morning, she borrowed Madeline's lipstick without asking. It wasn't about the color. It was about the skin it touched next. At a faculty-hosted reading, Declan read aloud a passage from The Picture of Dorian Gray.
"There is only one thing in the world worse than being talked about, and that is not being talked about."
He looked straight at the twins as he said it. After, he approached them.
He looked at Marissa and said, "You're Madeline, right?"
She smiled. "I can be." Madeline watched, eyes darkening. Later in the car, she turned to her sister and said, "You didn't correct him." Marissa smiled. "Why would I?" They didn't speak the rest of the ride home. Something had shifted. Not just tension, not just rivalry. Something darker. Marissa began dressing like Madeline, just a shade more carefully. Madeline started changing her schedule to cross paths with Declan. They circled each other like predators in the same body. Their bond, once their greatest strength, had become the very battlefield. Neither would admit they were falling for him, because neither was willing to admit they might lose him. Or worse, that they might lose each other. And behind Declan's half-smiles and haunted stares, something almost gleeful stirred, as if he knew exactly what he was doing. Marissa didn't mean to fall for Declan. Not really. It started with innocent moments. Quick chats after lectures, lingering near his office door, pretending to need help interpreting T.S. Eliot when she knew the verses by heart. But what began as curiosity became obsession. Declan fed it, gently, always politely, always with just enough attention to keep her coming back. and always calling her Madeline. She didn't correct him, not once, because in that moment, she wasn't just her sister's shadow. She was the light. She was the one he wanted. It happened one evening when Madeline stayed late working on a film assignment. Marissa saw her opportunity. She slipped into Madeline's favorite coat, a dab of her perfume, lip gloss, heels, and she went to Declan's apartment. He didn't flinch when he saw her. "Didn't expect you tonight," he said, stepping aside. She stepped in like she belonged. He poured wine. She took slow sips. They talked about literature, about passion, about twin souls. The lines blurred. And when he leaned in, she let him kiss her. She didn't stop him. She didn't tell him. She just whispered, "Don't stop." Meanwhile, the real Madeline had her own secret. She hadn't been working late. She had gone to Declan's apartment earlier that week, and she had kissed him first. He'd been careful, gentlemanly, tempting, but he had whispered, "I thought you'd never make the first move." She was confused. What first move? Only later did she realize. He'd thought she'd already been there. He thought he'd already kissed her. That's when Madeline knew. Her sister had been pretending to be her. And Declan, he'd let it happen. The discovery shattered something inside her. Madeline didn't confront Marissa, not at first. Instead, she watched, waited. She noticed how Marissa started dressing more like her again, taking her books, humming the same songs she did. It was like watching her reflection steal her life, piece by piece. One night, as they got ready for dinner, Madeline held up a pair of earrings. "You borrowed these last weeks," she said calmly. Marissa blinked. "No, I didn't." "You wore them when you kissed Declan," Madeline said. A silence fell between them like ice. Marissa's face went still. Then she smiled faintly. "I guess we share everything." Madeline's hand trembled around the earrings. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Not him." The days that followed were war disguised as routine. Declan seemed to sense the shift, but said nothing.
He still called whichever twin showed up Madeline.
Marissa began sneaking out more. Declan never questioned her identity. Madeline stopped showing up at his lectures altogether. Instead, she focused on her film thesis. She had a new idea for her final project, a short film, a documentary, about identical twins who fall in love with the same man. Madeline began recording conversations secretly, not just between her and Marissa, but between Marissa and Declan. She left her phone recording in her purse, in his apartment, in the car, and soon, she had it all. Proof of what Marissa had done, proof of what Declan had allowed. She edited the footage into something raw, intimate, devastating. Her film professor called it hauntingly brilliant. She didn't smile. It wasn't art. It was evidence. And she had plans. Marissa finally discovered the film the night before it was to be shown at the student showcase. She barged into Madeline's room, red-eyed and trembling. "You filmed us." Madeline turned slowly in her chair. "I told you not to steal him." "He didn't know." "You didn't care if he did," Madeline snapped. "You wanted to be me." Marissa's voice broke. "I just wanted to feel loved the way you are. You always get everything. Everyone always picks you." Madeline stood up. "Then maybe I should show everyone who you really are." That night, Marissa didn't sleep. She hacked into the editing suite, tried to delete the film. But it was too late. Madeline had already backed it up. She had also sent it anonymously to the university board and to Declan himself. What neither of them expected was Declan's silence. He didn't respond. Not to the email, not to the fallout. He simply disappeared, resigned, vanished, as if he had never existed. And in the void, he left. The sisters were left facing each other, with too many truths between them. Marissa didn't cry when Declan vanished. She didn't panic when the film was shown. She didn't explain or defend. She simply doubled down. If the world was going to remember one sister, it would be her. She dyed her hair to match Madeline's exact shade, changed her walk, her voice, her handwriting. She stopped correcting professors when they called her Madeline. She even answered her sister's emails. When the scholarship offer came in, for Madeline, Marissa accepted. She rehearsed every smile in the mirror. There was no Madeline anymore, only her. The real Madeline stayed silent for weeks. She watched as Marissa moved through her world, taking over her life. Professors raved about her latest project. Students congratulated her on the scholarship. Even their mother, absent for most of their lives, called to say she was proud. Of Madeline, but it wasn't her. And every stolen moment felt like another blade. The deeper obsession. Declan's silence haunted both. Marissa pretended not to care, but she checked his social media every day. No posts, no status, no photos, just gone. Until one night, while snooping through Madeline's emails, she found it. An unread message from Declan. Subject, I know who you are.
Madeline, I saw the film. I saw the truth. Meet me. One last time. D.
Marissa stared at the message, hands trembling. She could delete it, or she could answer it, pretend to be her again. And this time, maybe Declan would finally love her for real. Marissa showed up at the bar, wearing Madeline's scent and jacket. Declan was already there. He looked older, tired, but when he saw her, his eyes softened.
Madeline, he said.
She smiled. I wasn't sure you'd come.
I wasn't sure you would either.
They sat, ordered drinks, talked about the past like ghosts pretending to be real. He watched her carefully, like a man trying to recognize the face of someone he used to trust. And then, mid-conversation, he said,
Tell me one thing you never told anyone, something only you would know.
Marissa's blood ran cold. She hesitated, lied. Freshman year, I wanted to jump off the library roof. He blinked.
That was Marissa, he said softly.
Then he stood up and left. That was the night Marissa snapped. She returned home and tore through Madeline's room, ripping photos, burning old journals, destroying anything that held the past. Madeline arrived to find the mess and stood in the doorway, horrified. What did you do? Marissa turned slowly, eyes rimmed with red. I erased you. You need help. I need to be the one people love. Madeline backed away. You're sick. No, Marissa whispered. I'm just tired of losing. And she lunged. They fought, screaming, clawing, crying. Years of resentment boiled over. Every hurtful word, every stolen opportunity, every time one of them was the better twin. By the time their father pulled them apart, they were unrecognizable, bruised, wild-eyed, shaking. He didn't ask questions. He didn't want to know.
He just said, "You've destroyed this family."
And he left. The next day, Marissa was expelled. Forgery, academic fraud, stalking. The film Madeline had made was now viral. It was no longer a student project. It was a scandal. Professors were interviewed, articles written, lines blurred. Some called it performance art. Others called it evidence of mental collapse. Marissa disappeared from campus. Madeline stayed. But nothing felt like victory. Weeks later, Madeline received a handwritten envelope. No return address. Inside, a single note. You weren't the only one he kissed. M. There was no signature, no explanation, just that. A single final jab, or maybe a confession? Madeline went to Declan's old office. It was empty, dust-covered. But behind the bookshelf, tucked inside a poetry volume, she found it. On the flash drive, private footage, Declan. His apartment, 2 women, identical. Both in love with him, and both lying to each other. In the final clip, Declan looked at the camera and said,
They don't love me. They love the way I reflect them back. And I let them, because it made me feel wanted too. But they're both dangerous. And I've made it worse.
Madeline sat alone in the dark, watching it again and again. Realizing the truth, Declan had played them. He had known from the start who was who. He just didn't care. He wanted the drama, the attention, the ego rush. And in the end, he left both ruined. Madeline didn't cry when she saw Declan's final recording. She didn't scream or lash out. She sat still, frozen in the aftershock. She thought Marissa was the manipulator. She thought Declan was the victim. She thought she was the one who'd been betrayed. But the truth was crueler than that. They had all betrayed each other, repeatedly. A week later, she visited Marissa. The psychiatric facility was stark. White walls, no clocks. Marissa looked thinner, paler, her eyes dull and drugged. "You came to gloat?" she asked. "No," Madeline said softly. "I came to tell you the truth." She handed her sister a printout, a transcript of Declan's monologue. Word for word, Marissa read it slowly. Her mouth tightened, her fingers curled into fists. "He knew," she whispered. Madeline nodded. "He always knew. And he used us." Madeline nodded again, just like we used each other. For the first time, the silence between them wasn't filled with rage. It was filled with grief, for the versions of themselves they could have been, for the bond they'd lost, for the man who shattered them both and walked away clean. Marissa leaned forward. "He deserves to pay." Madeline smiled darkly. "I already have a plan." They called it Mirror, Madeline's final thesis film, a documentary, a psychological thriller, a confessional spiral. But this time, it wasn't about Marissa. It was about Declan, clips of him coaching them to lie on camera, messages he sent from anonymous accounts to stir them against each other, voice recordings pulled from backups of therapy sessions he'd secretly recorded, even footage of him saying, "The more they hate each other, the more they need me." It was brilliant, devastating, dangerous, and Madeline submitted it to every film festival in the country. Mirror went viral in 48 hours. It wasn't just a student film, it was a cultural event. People dissected every frame: podcasts, articles, think pieces titled "The Ethics of Declan," "The Twin Trap," and "Was It Love or Control?" Madeline gave one televised interview. She said only one thing: "He filmed us to break us. I filmed him to expose him." Marissa, now released into outpatient care, watched every minute. They were a team again, but this time as co-survivors. Declan lost everything: his job, his tenure, his reputation. Two more students came forward with similar experiences. One claimed he'd encouraged her to fake suicidal thoughts for a performance piece. Another revealed voice messages with disturbing instructions on how to cry like a victim. He vanished from public life. One reporter found him in a small town, working as a bartender under a fake name. He refused to answer questions. When asked if he regretted anything, he said, "I gave them something to feel. That's all anyone ever wants." Marissa returned home under a new agreement. Therapy, boundaries, no more pretending. Madeline stayed in school. Their father apologized, late but honest. Their mother came back from overseas to fix things, but neither twin let her. They had each other now. That was enough. They didn't talk about Declan anymore, but the scars he left remained, not to keep them wounded, but to remind them what they had survived. 6 months later, Madeline received a small package. No return address. Inside, a flash drive. She hesitated, then plugged it in. A new video played. Declan, sitting in a motel room, disheveled. He looked into the camera with hollow eyes.
You won, Maddie. Or maybe Marissa did. I don't even know anymore.
He laughed.
But you filmed me like I filmed you. You understood me. Better than anyone.
He leaned closer.
I never lied when I said I loved you both.
Then he turned the camera off. Madeline didn't delete the video. She didn't share it. She just saved it in a folder labeled Closure. Because sometimes the real end isn't about justice. It's about knowing the story is over. The house felt emptier than ever. Two sisters, once inseparable, now divided by scars deeper than skin. Marissa and Madeline lived under the same roof, but not the same sky. The silence between them was heavy with everything they didn't say. Marissa was back home after months of therapy and outpatient treatment. She had changed, quieter, colder, more distant. Her smiles felt like cracks in a mask. Madeline kept to her studies, burying herself in film projects and late-night editing. They existed side by side, careful not to touch old wounds. Their father tried to bridge the gap, but stumbled through awkward conversations and apologies that felt hollow. Their mother's return stirred old resentments. She pushed for normalcy, family dinners, counseling sessions, but the twins resisted. Madeline confronted her mother in a rare, explosive moment. "You left us to rot. You pretended it wasn't happening. You only came back when you wanted to fix your image." Their mother's tears were cold. "I did what I had to." Marissa added quietly, "You broke us too." Both sisters struggled with who they were beyond the other's shadow. Madeline began therapy, confronting her codependency and self-doubt. Marissa joined a support group for survivors of emotional abuse. Slowly, they started crafting separate lives, no longer reflections, but individuals. When a new student, Jonah, arrived at university, Madeline felt a flicker of hope. Jonah was kind, patient, and treated her as herself, not as a twin or victim. But Marissa saw Jonah differently. A threat. In dark moments, she spiraled into jealousy, old patterns resurfacing. She lied to him, planting doubts about Madeline. She sent anonymous messages, claiming Madeline wasn't who she seemed. Madeline confronted Marissa after Jonah distanced himself. The sisters fought. "Why do you always have to destroy everything?" Madeline cried. "I'm trying to survive," Marissa snapped. The argument exposed raw wounds, resentments, regrets, fears. But instead of breaking them apart, something shifted. In the days after the fight, Marissa reached out. She shared her darkest secrets, the fear of being invisible, the pain of losing Declan and Madeline. Madeline listened. No judgment, just understanding. They began rebuilding trust, slowly, painfully. They attended therapy sessions together. They talked about Declan, about the lies, the manipulation, and the damage. They found strength in their shared pain. Months later, at Madeline's film premiere, a documentary about twins, identity, and survival, Marissa sat beside her. The audience gave a standing ovation. In that moment, the sisters smiled. Not as rivals, but as survivors. One evening, as they cleaned out their childhood home, they found a box. Inside, old letters from their late grandmother. Letters revealing a secret. Their grandmother, too, had struggled with twin rivalry and jealousy. She had written about forgiveness and the power of breaking cycles. The sisters read the letters together, and finally, for the first time in years, they felt hope. The sisters never forgot the betrayal, the lies, or the heartbreak, but they chose to rise above it. Together, stronger, and free. 2 years later, Madeline and Marissa had grown into women who no longer defined themselves by their past betrayals. Madeline was now a celebrated filmmaker, her documentaries inspiring conversations about trauma, healing, and identity. Marissa had become an advocate, working with survivors of emotional abuse, sharing her story to help others break free from toxic cycles. One spring afternoon, Madeline received an invitation to a mental health conference. A keynote speaker was someone she never expected, Declan. Curious and cautious, she debated attending, but Marissa insisted, "We need to hear him out, for closure, if nothing else." The conference hall was packed. Declan stepped onto the stage, older, humbled, and visibly changed. His speech was raw and honest. This spoke of his manipulations, his guilt, and his desperate need for control stemming from his own childhood trauma.
"I was a broken man trying to break others," he said. "I'm here to own my mistakes and try to make amends."
After the speech, Madeline and Marissa approached Declan backstage. It was tense at first, but surprisingly, Declan apologized, not just to them, but to himself. He admitted he wanted to change, to find peace. The sisters didn't know what to make of this moment. Could they forgive him? Could they trust this new version of Declan? They didn't have to decide then. What mattered was that the past no longer controlled them. They walked away from the conference with lighter hearts, their wounds still there, but healing. Their bond, once shattered by lies and betrayal, was now tempered in fire and forgiveness. Back home, Madeline started a new documentary, this time about forgiveness. Marissa helped with interviews and counseling. Together, they were writing a new chapter, not of twin rivalry or destruction, but of hope and resilience. Their story wasn't just about betrayal, it was about survival, about reclaiming power, about choosing love over hate, and finally about the courage to forgive, even those who hurt us most.